Hey y'all, Emily here from fairymusic.com. Today we're taking a look at some compression basics. Now there's several types of compressors and each of them sound different. One may sound better on certain things than the other, so I wanted to go over these different types of compressors and how they work and in which situation we can best use a particular type of compressor. And the first compressor that I want to take a look at is the FET compressor. FET stands for Field Effect Transistor. Now, a FET compressor offers a quick transient response. And to go along with the name, transistor is a semiconductor that can both amplify and attenuate a signal based on the settings that you dial in. Now, I'm not going to be getting very technical with these things because this is just a basic overview, and I just wanted to give you a basic understanding on what types of compressors are out there for you to use and what, a few recommendations on what they sound best with. Now, out of the FET compressors, one of the most famous ones is the 1176 that you see pictured here. The 1176 is capable of a very fast attack times, but it does color the sound quite a bit. So, what would we use this on? Well, if we desire more punch, a FET compressor would be great. It's got that super fast attack, so it's going to work well on aggressive audio tracks. The slow attack time on a FET compressor is still faster than a tube compressor, which we'll get to a little bit later. Now, the FET compressor does add a lot of color to the sound, which can be quite pleasant on things like drums and vocals, even bass, and really kind of anything else, basically. I might not add this to strings or other orchestral instruments, but also there's no rules, right? I love to use the 1176 in parallel processing because of the color and vibe that it adds. Now, the 1176 FET compressor does differ from other compressors because it has a fixed threshold design. This means that if you want more compression, then you'll have to dial in the input level right here. After you've dialed in the input level, you can use the output knob to pull back the level that you're sending to your DAW. The attack and release are marked 1 through 7. Now, on most compressors, 1 would be the fastest setting, but on the 1176, it is the opposite. So, on an 1176 compressor, the 7 is the fastest, and 1 is the slowest. I remember this by thinking the higher the number, the faster it goes, kind of like a speedometer. Now, one thing that you can control also is the ratio, and you've got 4 of those to let you know how much of that compression is going to be used. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like on a kick here. So we'll dial that in. You see how the knob moves over here? Not very much. We don't have much input. So to get more compression, we'll add more input. And that sounds pretty good. And we can pull that back to whatever we're sending to our DAW. But it already sounds better, and we're not even in like the orange here. We're not even getting close to clipping that. So we can adjust our attack to be fast if we want to grab those transients faster. But like I said, this FET compressor, especially the 1176, is quite a fast compressor already. So I kind of want to compress that mid stride a little bit here, in between kind of a medium and fast. May go a little faster on the release. So let's see what that sounds like with and without. See how it kind of sounds a little thin, even though we've increased the volume a little bit? It's very thin, very just dull. And now with it, we're pulling up really good tone from the kick. We're even getting a little bit of air back in there, a little bit of room sound brought back up with it. Really helps things like kick out a lot. So let's move on to the vocal here. I want to show you what that sounds like because I'm going to use an 1176 on a vocal, especially a lead vocal, pretty much every time. So here we've got our lead vocal.
Shed your disguise, look the other way, just close your eyes.
So now let's add some compression on that, bring everything up.
Shed your disguise, look the other way, just close your eyes and make it go away. We'll see this through. I've been here all along. What can I do? I can feel you slipping away. They're coming for you, are you ready to go now? They're coming between us, they're calling to take you home.
I mean, you know that sounds better. It's adding just a little bit of color there, just a little bit of grit that really fills out a vocal. Adding saturation to a vocal really fills it out and cuts through a mix and just makes it sit nicely there. Now, a second most commonly used compressor is the VCA, which stands for Voltage Controlled Amplifier. Now, the VCA allows for full control of attack, release, parameters, and smooth response to compression itself. So we've got a little bit more control of what our threshold is also, and we can dial that in just a little bit better, and especially on things like the API 2500. Now, these are extremely fast. You can dial in control signal with your threshold knob to tell the compressor when to start turning the signal down. You've got the attack knob to let you know how fast to do it. You've also got a ratio knob for you to decide how much to do. And with the release knob, you can decide on how long it should take for the signal volume to return to normal. Now, what are VCA compressors known for? Well, a VCA compressor is known for its transparency and offers the highest possible amount of gain reduction compared to other types of compressors. It's also designed for a lot of control. So what are they commonly used on? Well, because VCA compressors are extremely fast, they work well on instruments that have big differences in transients, such as drums, and more specifically, a drum group track that you have all of your drums routed to. This also works very well as a mix bus compressor for those same reasons. Now, some examples of VCA compressors are the API 2500, which we'll take a look at, the SSL stereo bus compressor, and also the Neve 33609, great compressor. So I've got my API 2500 on my overall mix here on my mix bus. Now, this song is not mixed. This is just for demonstration purposes, and a couple of things are just kind of panned here and there, but I just want you to get an idea of how this compressor works when you put it on your mix bus. So I want to set my attack time quite a bit slower. I've got a 4:1 ratio here. Now, I know a lot of people like to put their ratio pretty low on their mix bus, but I think this works well. And my release is going to be fairly quick. Now, for group settings that I think that these types of plugins, these types of compressors work best on, I will play around with the release time here to see what works best. But pretty much the attack is going to be on 10. So in toggling back and forth between these three release settings, what I'm noticing is that on point 2 here, it sounds a little too glued. It sounds a little too mushed. And on 0.05, I feel like it's just a little too loose. So 1, to me, has the perfect amount of glue where everything is getting polished and everything is just sticking together nicely, and we're not having any of those flyaway transients that give us that kind of amateurish sound.
They're calling to take you home. They're coming for you and there's nowhere to hide.
So basically what I'm doing for my attack, or for my threshold here, basically what I'm looking for in adjusting my threshold is I don't want to go over 0 here. I kind of want to keep it in the sweet spot around there. And I don't like to see it hang around 3 for too long. I don't like it to just be laying here in the back, not doing anything for very long. So that's where the release comes in as well. Perfect for mix bus compression. Now, the third commonly used compressor is the optical compressor, or OPTO compressor. The OPTO compressor's gain reduction is controlled by a light source. It uses the incoming audio signal to feed a lighting element to trigger a light-sensitive resistor. The resistance of this light-sensitive element informs the compressor how much and how quickly the audio signal should be attenuated or reduced, and that's exactly what makes this design extremely unique. But the way this reacts to the light source does produce a delay in response time to trigger the attack and release of the compressor. This response time is often described as smooth and musical. A great example of an OPTO compressor is the LA2A. So what is the OPTO compressor best used on? Well, it works really well on bass, guitars, and vocals. I could also use a little bit of this maybe on some strings and or other orchestral type of instruments, as long as they're not super aggressive. Just kind of long and lush sounding. But then again, it depends on the performance. And if the performance has a lot of transients, you might be better using a different type of compression, perhaps a combination of the two. Now, how is the OPTO compressor used? Well, most OPTO compressors have 2 knobs, one for gain and one for a threshold or a peak reduction. The threshold, aka peak reduction knob, determines at what level the compressor will begin to engage. So if you want a lot of compression, you'll set lower thresholds, which is a higher peak reduction. And if you want less compression, you set a higher threshold, which is a lower peak reduction. Very important, the input knob is placed after the compression and is not the input gain to the compressor. It actually is the output to your DAW. It is called the input gain because it determines how loud the signal will be sent into your DAW. So this right here does not affect your peak reduction. This is not going to increase the amount that's going into the compressor. But let's take a listen to what that sounds like on the bass. So now that we've got a set peak reduction or compression, this is setting our threshold, we can increase that back into our DAW. So without the compressor, bass sounds kind of loose, right? With it, we're going to tighten it up. I really love this compressor on bass. Also, feel free to try it on different things. Always experiment. Like I said, no rules to this game. But these are designed to kind of work the best and shine best at their full capability on certain elements as far as how those elements were recorded. And the last compressor that I want to talk about, one of the fourth most commonly used compressor, is the variable MU, or the VariMu, or as I like to call them, a tube compressor. Now, the tube compressor is the earliest compressor design you can find. It's very much non-linear. The ratio increases with gain reduction, which means the louder a transient is, the more it's going to compress. It's much slower than a VCA or a FET, and is therefore often used to glue a mix together, because it grabs transients so slow, taming the transients musically. So, what do we use tube compressors on? Well, it's amazing on a mix bus, but also on thin sources. This is because of the tubes handling the gain reduction, which results in adding warmth and smoothing out things. Now, you should not use a tube compressor when you want punch or to solve dramatic dynamic issues. Now, how do we use the tube compressor? Well, driving the input can result in some very pleasant tube overdrive, which can be great to add some attitude to drums, vocals, electric guitars, electric bass. It also has a threshold knob. After you dial in the input signal, you can adjust the threshold, which determines how much gain reduction will be applied. This gives a little bit more flexibility than the FET compressor, which has a fixed threshold. The adjustable threshold on a tube compressor allows you more possibilities to drive the compressor really hard and then choose the desired amount of compression based on the input gain. Now, on older models, such as the Fairchild 670, which I have pulled up here, the attack and release times are bundled together through a parameter called time constants. On the Fairchild, the set time constant will have an attack and release that cannot be adjusted, but are set to complement each other. If you're on a lower setting, you will have a quicker attack and release time, and a higher setting will give you a slow attack, slow release time. But for this example, let's just put this on vocals, and this is going after that 1176, which is kind of like how I like to use it. I like to set the tone, bring up a lot of what I like in a vocal, kind of thicken up the vocal with the 1176, and then I like to use the Fairchild as my last vocal compressor. So let's see what that does.
Look the other way, just close your eyes and make it go away. We'll see this through. I've been here all along. What can I do? I can feel you slipping away. They're coming for you. Are you ready to go now? They're coming between us. They're calling to take you home. They're coming for you, and there's nowhere to hide now. They're coming between us, but I can't let you go.
So you can toggle through the different time constants, and this is going to vary from compressor to compressor. But I like 2 here. I believe that has a good attack and release time. And like I was saying, each one of these has the attack and release time combined in it. And you can check out for this particular, this is the Universal Audio Fairchild 670 model, and you can check out the manual for that to see which is which. If I set them right now, I would probably get them wrong, but I always tend to do vocals on 2. I just like the setting on that. And I'm always just kind of looking to tap around -3 on my compression, and for those louder peaks it can go a little bit over, but that's kind of where I'm just smoothing things out for vocals, and I really like it. It's going to be on my lead vocals, I would say 99% of the time. I would say 100, but you never know. So now that you've got an understanding of each of the most commonly used compressors, here are some things to think about when deciding which compressor to reach for. 1. How dynamic is the source I want to compress? 2. Do I want the compressor to only reduce the gain, or do I also want a little bit of color to the source? Number 3, how much control do I want? Now, I've also included a little diagram for you, which is totally free. You can download that from my website at fairairmusic.com. I think this will kind of help you get a little bit better understanding on kind of which one maybe to reach for on certain elements and certain audio. But always don't forget to experiment. These are just some guidelines to think about when you are getting familiar with compression and the different types of compressors out there. All right, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you did find something helpful in it, please go ahead, hit that like button. And if this is a video that you want to see more of, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's totally free to do that. We'll talk again real soon. Thanks, y'all.